and welcome to the coronavirus edition of Mark and Carrie. We are here socially distanced, appropriately with our headsets and our microphones and working from home. How are you doing, Blyth?
Living the dream.
I mean, what really?
Can I say? Yeah. I mean, this is it. So the funny thing is, if you're an academic, it's kind of, I've had this conversation with another academic today already, of course, via Zoom, or actually we use Skype, right? Is that for us, this is normal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So unlike most people who like go to work and have jobs and do stuff like this, we spend a lot of our time on our own reading, writing and researching. And we do that in home offices as well as our work offices. So in a sense, I've just basically been told, don't go to your work office for a while, work from home. We do that all the time anyway. So it isn't actually that odd, which is not true
as humans, we're kind of, as academics, we're kind of built for socially distance as well, right? We are not the most, I mean, we can turn on the extrovert part of ourselves, but for a lot of us, like social distancing is kind of, you know, what we've been doing, as to your point, doing for a long time.
Absolutely. I believe the term is as friendly and social as an academic.
Yeah, exactly. Warm and cuddly as a cactus. Yeah,
exactly. So what's been going on?
I don't know. Just, you know, I guess your once in a lifetime pandemic.
That's it. I mean, I was hoping we'd have something to talk about, and it seems that's the thing we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think so. We'll just have a few minutes of this, and then we'll talk more about something else, like how to play checkers or something.
No, we'll just talk about the pandemic. So where do you want to start?
I guess let's start at home. Where is America? I think last we did this, maybe Italy had yet to actually hit its peak, and we were all with our heads in the sand here in the U.S. I mean, I think on a daily, minute to minute, I have this question of where are we? Are we hitting a peak? Are we, like, where exactly are we, both from a public health standpoint, but also, you know, the political, the economic, the 5,000 other aspects of this as well. I mean, it seems like the social distancing, if we believe in science and data, seems to be working. Although, and some of the more populous areas are going to experience something more further into May, hit their peaks then. I mean, New York has just been, I mean, it's been awful to watch what's been happening there. Of course, we don't have any tests. We don't know when that will happen. The promise from the administration that we would have tests, whoever wanted a test could have a test. We haven't had yet. What's your perspective on the 5 billion of this?
So the way that I usually get my head around stuff is I write something. So I wrote a piece for foreignpolicy.com and another one for Foreign Affairs. The Foreign Affairs one is, I think, how I'm thinking about it the most, which is the following. It's all about models, right? So remember the financial crisis was all about a model called value at risk, and how much you could lose on a given day, which proved to be completely useless because the model was never stress tested against all the liquidity in the world drying up at once. So over the past couple of weeks, there's a debate about models, which is now beginning to get weaponized in the press, particularly on Fox and other media outlets like that, which is the Imperial College model, which guides a lot of the studies, basically makes a presumption. And it is a presumption because we don't have enough data about who really has been infected and who's not. A very small percentage of the population has been infected. Therefore, you need to do huge amounts of social distancing. That will get the R number down, the reinfection number down, and then you'll be hit by second waves, but you'll know how to deal with it, right? That's where we are. That's one. Then on the other side, you had the study from Oxford that came out that said 40% of Brits might already have it. In which case, your denominator, the number of cases, massively explodes. Your lethality goes down, and your probability of a second wave recedes. Everybody wanted to believe the Oxford one, but it seems to be after an initial bit of, how can I put it, beating up on the main guy at Imperial media by his guns. He's lowered his numbers because of social distancing, but he's still in that world. And that shows that it's definitely more than 3%, but it's a hell of a lot less than 40%.
Yeah.
So we don't know yet, right? We're still arguing using models. Now, then comes a question of how the United States is so badly hit. And that's what the piece in Foreign Affairs talks about. And it uses the perspective of your growth model. That is, what bits of GDP do you tickle in a country to get the country to grow? And in the United States, that tends to be a little bit of everything, from agricultural exports to tech exports to plane exports to massive domestic consumption. And like Anglo economies in general, these systems tend to run with very few redundancies and almost no airbags. So everything works so long as everybody works. But we never imagined a situation in which we would actually tell everybody not to go to work.
Yep.
It's just not built for that type of shock. So the president's stuff about we need to get the economy moving again, I have to say is actually right. Because you're not Scandinavia. You don't have a giant welfare state and redundancies and the ability to lock people down. You're not communist China where you can police the place with like 2 million members of the Communist Party and authoritatively tell people to stay indoors or you're in deep trouble. So this system only works if everybody works. But the problem is this: if everybody works and the Imperial study's right, then you've got a huge public health problem and you're going to make it worse. You can't open the economy without having solved the health problem. And if your healthcare sector is 20% of GDP and you blow that up, you've already done in your economy. So you can't have it. Doesn't matter when you want to talk about it. So that's kind of where we are, I think.
So that the opening of the economy is, I mean, just even that term is a misnomer. You can't open it if we don't know who's sick, who doesn't have it, who's had it, all of these things, because even if we opened it up, we would blow up the healthcare part of our economy and sink ourselves. So in a lot of different scenarios, we're sunk.
And again, think about this as stresses and redundancies, right? Once you put the healthcare sector in certain areas of the country, at least through hell, and you infect 50% of your A&E people, accident and emergency people, and you basically give PTSD to a whole bunch of people who are dealing with thousands of deaths over multiple weeks. Let's do it again.
Right.
Right?
Yes,
yeah, that's going to work, right? Where are you going to find those people?
Yeah. Or even our frontline grocery store workers who are getting really sick.
Yeah, and I mean, and then there's the whole security of the food chain, etc. We could talk about that a little bit, about sort of how the discourse on immigration has changed because of this. But that's certainly where we are economically. I mean, just like epidemiologically, we don't exactly know where we are. Economically, we don't know where we are. But if you look at the way that different countries have kind of put together, the United States is kind of like a Mustang. No airbags, big engine, straight down the road, fabulous. If you crash in it, you die. Right. Western Europe's like a Volvo. It's a lot safer. It's a bit clunkier. It's not as much fun, but you probably want to be in that when there's a car crash.
Well, and that's what we were. I mean, we're the Mustang speeding down the highway at 80 miles an hour in January, and then we went off the rails. By the way, I did try to read both articles, but they're behind a paywall. And so I didn't...
A great line that I saw in Nature magazine, because you can get a free version of Nature without being behind a paywall, is that facts are behind paywalls and rumors are free for everyone. That
is such a smart point, because I thought, oh, this is great. And then, but a lot of people are putting their COVID related stuff free. And so I thought it was still,
right. Well, what you can do is actually just open up a browser you don't usually use and then clear the cache. And then try it again, and that'll go, because it'll think you're a first-time user.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Yeah, that's a really great
little
point.
Hack. There we go.
What is? I guess it. I mean, it sounds like from everything, I listen and read all the same stuff everybody else does. Is that the president's going to open? I don't know what open means, but open on everything up on May 1st. So it seems like this has got to be some sort of slow roll. It'll be essential employees, and how that's defined obviously will be the most important part of this.
Yeah, and I think that's. It may be early. My bet really is things really start opening up around June 1.
Yeah.
I think it'll be rolled to that point. And then we'll have to deal with the consequences if the Imperial model is more right than the Oxford model. And we'll have to stagger it and all that. But we've never done this before. Adam Tooze has a great piece up on foreignpolicy.com. He says, if you think about this for more than 5 minutes, the notion that we just took an extended leave of absence and then we'll all go back to work, maybe 1/3 of those restaurants will never open again.
Yes.
Right? Huge amounts of businesses have not just a liquidity problem, a solvency problem. And that goes to the growth model and the very structure of American companies. I mean, it's very interesting now and talk about what the government's done in terms of bailouts and all the rest of it. All of these things that we were told for years and years you can't have, right? The central bank buying junk bonds, direct financing of the people through checks for stimulus, all that. We're doing all this sort of stuff. We can get into why it's easier to do it for companies than it is for people, right? But nonetheless, Congress has done unprecedented action, right? And that's interesting. But here's the question. Why did we have to bail out cruise lines?
This is a good question.
Why do we have to bail out airlines?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? What are we doing with all this stuff? And the short answer is because American business runs with no cash.
Yep. No,
it's amazing.
I saw something that said, so I'm going to have to pay $200 for my change fee on my plane ticket. That just comes back to me because I'm bailing you out as a taxpayer. I mean, it just seems like utterly insane, the circular.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff in the press just now about buybacks, share buybacks.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't heard anything about this sort of stuff, essentially the argument is, and there's a little bit of dubiousness about the argument in some shape or form, but the bottom line is, if you look at companies buying back shares, and then you look at other people and other things buying shares, then about 90% of all the action in the stock market over the past 10 years has been companies buying back their own shares.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, it's a giant Ponzi scheme. They get in revenue, they take out what they essentially have to do for investment. Any free cash flow is then used to buy back the stock. That increases the earnings per share. That's a key metric for when C-paid. So everybody in the C-suite boosts the price, and then they award themselves huge bonuses.
But in effect,
the whole company. But then the whole company essentially has no cash buffer.
Right.
So when it comes along, anything like this, then the old business adage of always have 90 days in cash and 90 days in the bank. Forget that. There's
right.
nothing.
So they're in fact, like so many of us, are living paycheck to paycheck too. So it's not like all of this is flowing down, I guess, because none of us have anything.
Exactly. We've been running the whole economy on razor thin margins and the assumption that you can always have access to credit.
I mean, so in a lot of ways, it's one big Ponzi scheme in everybody. I mean, to the household level, all the way up.
Absolutely. Well, the airline figure is astonishing. I think it's 94 or 96% of their free cash flow, which basically means all of your profits minus what you put into things like buying planes and new uniforms and occasional pay increases, right? It's $48 billion. And all of that went into buybacks. And guess what they got as a bailout? $50 billion.
Jeez.
I mean, it really is. It's crony capitalism on an astonishing and epic scale. It's truly shocking.
And it's hard to hold these two thoughts in your head while and I feel incredibly lucky to have the ability to work from home. But while you're, the economic anxieties that we're just feeling as people out there in the world, and to hold that in your head. And then on the other side, think, oh, the government's bailing out these to the tune of exactly what they want and for what reason. I mean,
and think about it, do you think that the airlines have had their money already? I would say yes, right? Why does it take so long to get checks? First of all, why are we even using checks to send money to ordinary people? I mean, we've got phone banking. There's actually a thing called Treasury Direct. I don't know, most people don't know this. You can go to the Treasury's website, just to treasurydirect.com, and you can open up a personal account at the Federal Reserve.
I did not. That's very interesting.
And then you can buy bonds, but you could reverse that channel and use it to dump money in your bank account. So why is it that the administration is taking weeks and weeks to give checks to people who have no money? Because 80 million workers in America are hourly workers with no statutory sick pay. And yet you can bet your bottom $50 billion that the money for the corporates was there within 24 hours.
And you look at other countries, Canada, I mean, run the list, and you file your unemployment, and within 2 days or 24 hours, that money is in your bank. And meanwhile, people are handing out paper applications for unemployment in some states, and they're standing in these crazy lines.
It's the Mustang. This is the Mustang barreling down the road. It's only got one gear in one direction. Anything else is a disaster.
I mean, this is when I really think a lot about our investment in government. And I know we want to drain the swamp and government's bad. We need the swamp. And it's times like these when you especially need the swamp, but it shows you how decades of no investment in government infrastructure, this is why it takes us it'll take some people probably until the fall to get their $1,200 check. That's just seems paltry in comparison to the problem. And I just think we have done this to ourselves in the political way, that we have said no government, no government, no government. And so this is what government now does for us. And
that's right.
It's
now where's my tax cut?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably coming in for
that's coming. Away. There's going to be after they've bailed out all their friends and therefore the roads. They're going to say, but look we're going to have to do brutal austerity because I don't want to pay any taxes for this. That's basically, that's.
Well, I thought so much about you because I started to see in European newspapers the austerity experiment is now over as COVID.
But it's actually not true. I mean, the funny thing is in Europe, the only way that they really have a big fiscal impact is they do mutualized bonds, Corona bonds. and then you can raise new debt, which would be outside of all the rules, and therefore the Italians could spend 10% of GDP and make a difference. But they don't have that. They've got some kind of quasi-mutual agreement to borrow from a thing called the ESM, and half the Italian politicians have told them off it because they're fed up being insulted. So Europe's in its usual pathetic state, with the Dutch being rude, the Germans being obstinate, and the Italians finally going, you know what, I've had enough of this crap.
Well, I mean, and this is another part of us to talk about, this nationalistic response to it of, the US, we don't have any stuff, and New York isn't going to give ventilators to Wisconsin, and on and on and on. But it was interesting, just at the top, you mentioned that Germany has done really well in their response to it. And, have they helped Italy and Spain, just thinking about the EU, or has it also been a nationalistic response?
There initially was a nationalistic response, and then China showered Italy with masks. And the Germans were saying, no, we're not mutualizing debt. Basically, solidarity means you need to be more responsible. And for one moment, they went, oh my God, we look horrible. And then the Dutch basically came along and said something even ruder. And then eventually someone said, this whole thing about Dutch directness can actually peak. You don't have to be like a total arse the whole time. And so they've dialed it back. And there is, there's cooperation, there's some sharing, etc. But we're in a situation where these healthcare systems, everybody's short of PPE, that new word that we know now,
yes.
right? Everybody's short of essential stuff because we optimize. We have no redundancies. We never think in terms of these things being inevitabilities. They're always a black swan. And if you think about it, there's been, how many? SARS, MERS, Ebola.
H1N1.
Yeah, right, exactly. There's been 5 black swans. You've got a flock.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's time to think a little bit ahead, but we'll maybe get there someday.
So let's change to your neck of the woods rather than mine. Let's talk about politics. Bernie's out. What's up?
Bernie is out. He gave a very somber goodbye, although it wasn't really goodbye. It seemed more of like a ... see you later sort of thing. Larry Craig did a great. If you watched SNL over the weekend, he did a great take off a satire of it. And, Joe Biden is maybe in his basement. We haven't heard a lot from him, but it's been interesting because the response has been, we don't want Joe actually out there because he's not good with words and he'll just screw it up. And so we just want him to respond only at the most necessary times. If it was someone who was like Barack Obama and had new words and put them together really well, we would want them out front. But someone like Joe, we know he's just going to shoot himself in the foot. So he's actually doing the right thing by standing back.
All right. So what's going to happen then? Because go back to the Imperial model, right? Work this one through for me. And you're our politics person here, right? So we had Wisconsin, where you had that whole debacle in the state between the governor and the legislature. It was settled at the level of the Supreme Court. There was an epic exercise in voter suppression with the Republican commissioner standing there in full PPE with goggles saying it's perfectly safe to vote, right? And 5 out of 130 polling stations or whatever. Is this a taste of the future? Is this what we're going to get through both the primary season and then if we get a second wave virus in the fall, is it possible that Trump declares a state of emergency and there's no election? How real is that idea?
I mean, I think that's what you just said gave voice to all the fears of anybody on the political spectrum, is that delayed primaries and it's a red state versus blue state, or however the state leg is sort of is set up, and that we're in our Mustang, except we're in our political Mustang headed towards a delayed general election. And what exactly does that look like? I mean, the one thing that I'll say about that is that it's really hard to do this from a national level because elections are controlled by local and state authority, by the county clerk of, Mason County, which is where I grew up. I mean, those things, our elections are really, monitored, and they're done from that particular level. So what you would see, I think, instead are rogue counties and cities and municipalities deciding on their own thing, which is in some ways even worse, because if you have, the left and the right and left, the West and East Coast deciding on something in the middle, and however that looks, I mean, that's sometimes in some respects even worse, because you get partial elections, they'll never be legitimate.
Right.
So it's better just to have everything called off or postponed until never, and he'll just be the king.
But does the president have the power to suspend a general election?
Well, I mean, if we take a very broad reading, which they generally do, of the second of the not the Second Amendment, sorry, of executive power in the Constitution, then yeah, I mean, the president executive power is vested in Article 2. Thank you. Article 2 of the Constitution. The president has executive power to make these decisions. Now, from a statutory regulatory perspective, that's where we're not sure, because we are in uncharted waters. I mean, historians would say we've had an election in the Civil War, we've had elections during world wars. What we would have, and of course, this brings up the point about vote by mail, which a number of states have fully established. The president has very clearly gone on record and said that vote by mail helps Democrats. I'm not interested in that, and also wants to defund the U.S. Postal Service. So, I mean, all of this is cascading into what exactly? I mean, like everything, confusion and pandemonium.
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
mean, that one just I just flabbergasted by this one. So there may be a second stimulus bill because the first one was bollocksed up enough.
Yeah.
All right. So, but then the one thing is we can't fund the post office, and I was just puzzling over this. Then John, our engineer, says, "Well, it's postal voting, of course. Like you just take out the postal vote by taking out the post office." And I just imagined, like, this is a country that I joined 30 years ago, right? This is supposedly the most advanced country in the world in certain metrics, right? And if you'd said to me, think of a country whereby the president blows up the post office to stop people doing postal votes, I wouldn't have thought the United States. But now I am. And
Yeah.
that's just tragic.
Yeah.
Absolutely tragic.
It's so transparently craven. It's just so transparent, I guess. I
But you
mean,
see this with the supplies, right? Tell us
yeah.
about the all the stuff with the supplies and the Fed stepping in versus the states. What's going on with that?
Well, I mean, this is where I feel, I mean, I've gone down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, but here we are, we're working from home, so this is what we do. I mean, I do wonder if in the not so back parts of my head is the president holding back on supplies, PPE, ventilators, masks, for holding back on blue states, waiting for red states, because red states are further behind New York and California, for example. And is he holding back? I don't know if you caught any of the Jared Kushner part of the press conference when he said that there's a national stock supply or national supply of stuff, but it's not meant for states. And you're like, but that's
Yeah, and
things that don't
then
go
they
together.
rewrote the website to actually
Yeah.
suggest that, when in fact the original website, which of course is archived so you could find it, says this is for states.
Yes,
Right.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, the president playing politics with this, I mean, anybody would have done this, but I think it's the transparent nature of this president playing just totally brazen politics with it. I mean, think about Florida, and Ron DeSantis, who still hasn't done a statewide order, I don't think, as a
Right.
statewide
And
stay at home.
they got more stockpile supplies of ventilators than New York did, which was in the
Exactly.
middle of it.
Yeah. And
So
they also have this
yeah.
huge population that are going to get terribly sick. So, I mean,
Yes.
yes, but do they need it right now? I guess is the political
Well,
equation.
there's also, then there's also the whole thing of the story of the plane coming into Boston and
Yes.
state troopers basically guarding it and then guarding the supplies that came off it, because the Boston people were worried quite seriously about the feds trying to nick it off them.
Yes.
So you almost
Yeah.
had a standoff between different levels of state authority over who controls these supplies. And it's just, when you think about responses in any other developed country, it's like you would never get to that position.
If you listen to the experts on disaster preparedness, et cetera, I mean, the two things that they said that today the president could do that would help is, one, do a national stay-at-home order, and two, that the federal government buys the ventilators and distributes them instead of the whole,
Yeah.
states
The
bidding
bidding
against
war,
each other. Yeah.
And you know that neither of those things will happen.
No. In fact, we'll probably get the opposite of both of those things. The one thing I did want to bring up, and I thought I've just been, reading all the op-eds and that sort of stuff, is the way the president, I don't know if he still uses this, but he was calling it the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus. And he had scratched out in his notes like COVID and written that. And I thought a lot about this, because I will say, Mark, this is one time when I live in Providence, Rhode Island. I don't live in, I live in pretty regular America. I thought, I'm a little scared to go out. I don't want people yelling at me. Like, I'm already freaked out by people at the grocery store away because we're masked. No, I mean, this is Providence. Nothing's going to happen. And then you start to read, and I know Twitter is an N of zero, but it was something that I thought a lot more about. And it's one, I guess, bigger picture. What I wanted to say is that we often call viruses from whence they came, right?
Spanish flu,
the West Nile, etc. And I think it's the weaponization, of course, that the president has used this. But then there's that paradox, is that he then tweets that he and President Xi are best friends. So there's that weirdness. But this is very different because, of course, it's the economic anxieties and general anxieties that we have that are layered on top of all of this, and people just being freaked out and then this coming out in these really awful and terrible ways. There's been a number of hate crimes that we'll wait to see how they get prosecuted. But it's a very insecure time in this country, and you see a president really stirring the pot on a lot of these, xenophobic ideas and a lot of the stuff that's so historical and old, and yet here we are still.
But one group that paradoxically is benefiting from this are the people who were getting kicked 7 ways to Sunday over the past several years, that being migrants.
Oh, are they? I thought they were totally getting
now they're essential workers, because it turns out, guess what? What we've known forever is that about 80% of the crops in America are picked by seasonal migrant workers.
Oh.
So when ICE rolls them up and chucks them over the border, unfortunately, all the people in the Midwest who are there, who are unemployed or underemployed, aren't leaping to go out and pick potatoes. It turns out they're just not. So all this stuff is rotten in the fields already because there's oversupply, because all the restaurants and everything is shut down. But then you've still got to clear this stuff and get it off there, and you've got to get it in the food chain, because we still have 330 million people to feed, right? So California has started giving them bits of paper that basically say they have protected status because they may be undocumented, but they're essential workers. And ICE has actually changed its profile now. We're only going after bad people who do drugs and stuff like that. So essentially, we're admitting the complete hypocrisy and nonsense behind the immigration politics, which is, I'll give you a perfect example of this, right? Brexit Britain, right? So Brexit Britain, immigration, controlling our borders, whatever. The 2 nurses that stayed by Boris Johnson's bed and nursed him back to health, which he fully acknowledges, one was from New Zealand and the other one was from Portugal. If it wasn't for migrant workers, you'd be dead.
I mean,
now,
actually,
I think that one positive aspect of this is that the Brits might actually shut up about immigration after this. That's a pretty salient example. But we won't. We will continue to pillorize. We will continue to demonize, whilst we turn the other way. Right? All of our meat packing is done by people from Mexico and Central America, right? So they're all the targets, right? They're still the bad people. They're what Trump called them, the rapists and criminals, right?
Yes, yep.
And they're why you have meat, and they're why you have vegetables. So we won't actually say, oh, we should probably be nice to these people. We'll give them bits of paper, but then we'll still beat them up.
That is insane to me that we've deemed them essential workers, so they can continue to pick the strawberries that we put in my smoothie in the morning.
Exactly.
And then,
I do blueberries, actually.
Which are very hard to pick.
What do you put in your smoothies?
I don't actually eat smoothies, but in my metaphorical, do you do a smoothie?
I do, actually. I do a lot of smoothies in the morning, because I'm not really hungry in the morning, so I just need something to get me going. So I do
like a big breakfast.
I do protein powder, banana, blueberry, bit of milk. Off you go.
Oh, I like a farmer's breakfast. I like a big hearty breakfast.
I do, but I then want to have a heart that still functions.
I guess I don't. I like a high cholesterol, egg, some sort of green on the side and something like that.
So listen, we've been very down on the US here, even more so than usual today. And we have to remember there is a national emergency and thousands of people are dying. So are there places that are worse than the United States at handling this?
Well, there is the example, and I just caught a tiny bit of this on Twitter, was Bolsonaro.
He does seem to be the poster child for the moment.
I mean, he seems like, I listened to him on mute. He's very charismatic on mute, though. And you don't understand Portuguese. Like he was like, he seems pretty great, very handsome. But he's really crazy.
Yes.
This thing is, he said it was a hoax and we just need to say where we just keep
apparently his supporters have been holding massive rallies on the streets of Sao Paulo. And he's a bit like Trump in the sense that he has that 40% and it doesn't matter what he does. Yeah. He could basically declare war on the Klingon Empire tomorrow, lose horribly, and 40% would be like, that was the right thing to do, right? So he has exactly the same base of sort of the conservatives, the evangelicals, whatever. Information doesn't matter, right? And what it reveals, I think, is something really fascinating. And somebody else wrote this, and I thought it was a really good insight. There's actually a kind of, to use a horrible word, an ontological difference emergent rather than a partisan difference. and there's a certain way in which people who are on these socially distant, accept science, whatever, look at the world as being constituted by certain stuff and made up in a certain way. And then there are people who are much more on the like, no, it's all God's plan or whatever else it happens to be, right? And faith and family and off you go. And then that stuff just doesn't really matter, right? So it makes perfect sense to go out and have a giant rally in the middle of Sao Paulo. Now, here's the interesting thing. If the Oxford study's right, most of them will survive. They will say that they were proven correct and we were all losers and wimps. If, on the other hand, the Imperial study is right, they will all massively die, and then we will be able to say, told you so. Either way, it gets weaponized.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the other, I mean, the people who, if we're on the Oxford side, will also say, give their rationale for why it is that they survived, right? Either like they did something or they drank some potion that the president told them to that did absolutely should do nothing.
Or because they were the ones who believed in God.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Correlation is causation.
Well, and your point about either way is partisan and is weaponized is so interesting because it doesn't matter. I mean, science is science and science is for some, but the left and like over here is my rationale. Well, you know, I wash myself in salt water every night or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very odd. I mean, it becomes much more than a partisan issue. It becomes a question of what types of truth statements are acceptable on a base level about the world.
Yeah.
And while that's always been a fringe part of the United States and other societies, think Scopes, monkey trial, etc. I mean, there has been a kind of broad acceptance of at least you could say, if not soft social science, political science, economics, their models, whatever, good reasons to doubt that sort of stuff. But then with climate change, you saw this, right? I mean, you know, this is physics. I always love it. I've used this on the show before. This is Greta Thunberg's line. Why are you having an argument with physics? Physics doesn't care, right? But for some people, it's not physics, or physics doesn't really matter. I can have an argument because it's really not about physics.
Yeah.
And that's a very strange partisan, beyond partisan divide.
Well, and it's a place where you can't apply logic, anyone's logic or reason, because it's in some ways it's purely emotional. That I see what I see and I believe what I believe, and so you're just not going to move me at all. I mean, on your point, for a second on the environment. I mean, the environmental stuff has been fascinating. Did you see in Delhi that they can see the main arch, and they haven't been able to see it in like 5,000 years or something because of the air pollution, or you can see the Himalayas. I mean, it's kind of incredible.
We're actually on target to hit climate targets for the first time ever.
I mean, it's crazy.
Now, of course, if you add all this together, you get the perfect right-wing conspiracy theory, right? So basically, the whole point of it is to impose communist control. So communist control is very hard to do because people will revolt because they have guns, right? Forget the fact that you're going to a nuclear weapons fight with a gun, but just put that to one side, right? So therefore, how do you put this on? Well, you have a pandemic. The pandemic allows you to lock people in their houses, take away their rights, and it gets the levels down for the environment. You then come out of the pandemic with much bigger social control and tracking, especially through 5G and all that sort of wonderful stuff, right? The conspiracy theory. And then because of that, what you're able to do in the next step is to say, well, look, we're so much better off with these environmental goals. Let's keep things down at this level.
Yep.
And then eventually it's just another step on the road to basically communist control. I mean, you know already there are thousands of people having that discussion online.
Oh yeah, and I mean, there's a great op-ed I think in the Washington Post about will the authoritarians give up. I mean, they've taken even more power in this age of tracking, et cetera. And will they give that power up? And of course, the answer is no. They're
absolutely not.
Do that. Yeah.
But don't worry, Google will save us, I'm sure.
Well, Google, Apple, right? They're building
Apple. I know there's nothing scary about the two of them collaborating on things that track our every moment. I mean, you know, not that I'm a part of the conspiracy, but it doesn't really fill me with confidence, even if I accept that it's medically necessary. Yeah,
I mean, I've given up on worrying about Facebook. I'm fully back on Facebook now, even though I had shut, because, you know, you want to see what people are up to. So I don't know. I guess they all win in the end. They all win in the end. Big tech company.
So is there anyone who's not winning in the end?
Well, I have to chuckle because, you know, there are a lot of celebrities that I think have good intentions, but are just falling flat on their face. You know, David Geffen, you know, the billionaire music mogul, always known as a man of the people, right?
A man of the people.
His like 500-foot yacht.
Super yacht.
Yeah, and like the grenadines or something with, and like the comments were so hilarious. I mean, my favorite one was "Read the world, David." I mean, it was so like, it wasn't even let them eat cake. It was like, doesn't everyone have a
Exactly.
yacht like I do?
So I missed
It
the Gal
was
Gadot thing.
hilarious.
What was that all about?
Well, she did this thing that was, John Lennon's Imagine, and then like handed off the mic to people. And so it was like people like Will Ferrell winning Imagine or singing Imagine. And you're like, I did never expect that. It was just bad. The singing was bad. It was off key, and it was just like so self-indulgent. Like, look at all these celebrities singing, and you're like, shut up.
Exactly.
What's
So
kind of,
I
yeah,
wonder if this is the end of kind of the Instagram business. You know, like really celebrity sort
yeah.
of culture, influencers, all the rest of it. When we emerge from this in whatever shape or form we're in, if a third of all restaurant workers are never going to find a job in a restaurant again, right? If global supply chains have been completely disrupted, if people have gone through ridiculous hardship because of the inability or unwillingness of the government to give them the money they promised them, right? Is anyone really going to give a damn about celebrities anymore?
I wondered the same thing. I was going to ask you if you ever thought movie theaters were going to open again, because I mean,
I know. That's a huge one. Absolutely. Do you want to sit
yes,
there breathing in the air of 500 people if there's a
right.
chance that this is going wrong? It's like
Yeah.
malls. It's like, okay, so when you think about America, you think about malls, right? Get out and shop, right? Now, maybe with some of the outdoors slash, what do you call them? The factory outlet type malls, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
we've got a giant mall in Providence whose business model is problematic already because of the decline of big store retail and online and all that, right? But if you open up that mall and 2,000 people from Providence went, let's go shopping, would you be 2001?
Yeah, exactly. No.
Because you could
Yeah.
literally shop till you drop.
Yeah. That's very true. Are you baking? Has
I
anyone
am.
offered
I'm
you
baking.
a
I'm actually.
sourdough starter? Oh, you are
No,
baking.
God, no, that's far too advanced. No, I have a hack. And if you like German
Please.
type bread, right? If you like the type of bread that's so dense it has its own neutron gravity field, right?
Yeah.
If you drop it on your foot, it goes through the floor and
Yeah.
sort of starts something at the Earth's core. What to do is go to Whole Foods,
Okay.
right? And get their whole wheat frozen pizza dough,
Okay. I'm
which
gonna write
is
this down.
disgusting as pizza dough, right? Like why anyone would want
Doesn't
whole
sound
wheat
good.
pizza dough,
Yeah.
I'll never know, right? So what you do is you get it and you defrost it because it's usually frozen. Then make up a little bit of water, yeast, and sugar, just like a tiny bit in a cup, right? And then put that into a bowl and a lot of, a big full sachet of yeast, right? And then a little water and sugar. Let that sort of go for a few minutes until it starts to froth. Then put the dough in it and work this yeast all the way through it.
Uh-huh.
So you're doing a secondary fermentation, right? So you wipe all that through it, then you dump it on a bit of flour, you form it into a bowl, and then dump it in a bowl into an oiled bowl and
Yeah.
put some
Right.
cling film over the top, right?
Okay.
So it'll do a secondary fermentation, become much bigger, right? Strip it off, pack it down, leave it for about an hour, chuck it in the oven for 45 minutes at about 500 degrees,
Holy cow.
right? Comes out, it is the perfect German bread.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, but you've been able to find yeast, because I can't find yeast anywhere. You must just have
Really?
some at
No,
home.
I
Yeah.
always have some in the fridge. I have
Oh,
big
I
jars in
see.
the fridge because I use a lot of it.
Oh, I see. I see. Well, that sounds like a really hearty bread to 500 degrees. Holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, it's the type of stuff like you cut it in micro thin slices because if you actually eat too much of it, you will just like explode or,
Like chip it to
gravity will pull you through the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
you? What have you been doing?
Yes, more cooking. I mean, I've baked a little bit, but I'm, busy staring at the ceiling and worrying about the fate of humanity. So I need to, but then I get really anxious and stressed out. And I find that the best thing for me to do is just to be in a self-deprivation tank. So I've baked a few things. I'm doing a book club with my nieces. So we're reading like murder mysteries, and like actually we're reading Pride and Prejudice, which I've never read before. So
Okay.
I'm baking scones for that. But other than that, just kind of just trying to hang on.
Fair enough.
Nothing special, but I'm going to try your pizza dough bread.
Well, one piece of advice in closing. This was the slogan of the English cricket team. The summer they beat the Australians, which never happens, and they came back home with a tournament trophy called the Ashes. Gin is the tonic.
I do like that. I mean, in times like these, it's time to self-medicate.
Mother's little helper is always a good thing.
It is. Well, we will be back soon. Now, Now that we have our
Now
setup.
that's from
Yes,
home.
we will do that
Amazing.
soon. Thank you all for listening. Take care, everybody.
Bye.